everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Crime in the Courtroom. John Collins here with you. Today is actually May 18th, although we're recording on Monday, May 4th. So this is going to be published right in the middle of the annual symposium of the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors, where this afternoon I'm probably halfway through a strength-based leadership and teamwork workshop. So for everybody at the symposium, I hope you have a great week. And we've been looking forward to this for quite some time. For those of you that know me well, and particularly if you caught our episode two weeks ago on the 4th of May, I talked a little bit about my new book, Valid Comparisons, and we spoke a little bit about the importance of lawyers in the courtroom doing their jobs and doing them well. And one of the things that I've talked about before, and I've spoken about, and I've certainly written about, has been my experience with prosecutors, in particular. And like many of you that listen to the podcast, some of the most impressive individuals that I've ever worked with in my career were prosecutors. But also some of the worst I ever encountered were prosecutors as well. And as I've mentioned before, I'm based here just outside of Detroit, Michigan, and Michigan, interestingly, is a very prosecutor-centric state. It has a very prosecutor-centric criminal justice system. Here in Michigan, prosecutors are very powerful, and I had an opportunity some time ago, and one of the reasons that I was really so excited to speak with our guest today is that. One of the worst cases that I ever worked as a forensic expert was in what was in my opinion, a malicious prosecution of a professional basketball player. I got involved in that because I knew the prosecutor, and I did it for free. I offered to do it pro bono. This is a professional athlete. They could have paid me a lot of money, but it was important to me to do it for the right reasons. And he was eventually acquitted. And it was one of the more egregious instances of prosecutorial misconduct that I've ever seen. So I'm really excited to speak today with Iris Eytan. Iris is the founder and CEO of Protect Ethical Prosecutors, a first of its kind reform campaign that works to end prosecutorial misconduct and bring accountability to the most powerful actors in the criminal legal system. After nearly 30 years as a criminal defense lawyer, Iris walked away from her practice to take on a system that she argues shields unethical prosecutors from consequences even when they violate constitutional rights. She is a former deputy state public defender, having represented thousands of defendants and secured acquittals in high-profile murder trials, and she's best known, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with her about this, for uncovering egregious prosecutorial misconduct in a case called People versus Barry Morphew. I hope I'm spelling that right, which led to the dismissal of murder charges, but also, and this I about fell over in my chair when I read this, but also led to the disbarment of an elected district attorney. Iris, welcome. It's so great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so looking forward to our conversation.
Boy, I am too. First of all, where are you located, Iris?
I'm in Denver, Colorado.
Denver, Colorado. Okay, so you was most of your legal career, particularly on the defense side, was that in Colorado primarily?
Primarily, some in California, where I initially started my law practice, and then, but that was for people with mental illness and civil rights work. And then Colorado was mostly criminal defense.
Okay, so I mentioned in the opening there, some of my own interests, but that's just skimming the tip of the iceberg. One of the things, having been in this business for over 30 years, like you, it's never lost on me how much power prosecutors have. And I've always felt that part of the reason for that is also because they have so much responsibility. They are the only party in criminal trials that have any burden of proof, right? A lot of people don't fully appreciate that. The defense doesn't have to say a thing, don't have to present any evidence, but the prosecution has to. And a lot of times with responsibility, comes power. But I would love it if you would, take a few moments to tell us about your organization, Protect Ethical Prosecutors, and what it's about and what it's trying to accomplish.
So you hit the nail on the head with your question. Protect Ethical Prosecutors, or we call it PEP, is focused on one specific problem. And it's prosecutors that have enormous power. And when they violate people's constitutional rights, there's often little accountability. And that's because the accountability measures that have been put in place are ineffective. And so there's a big gap between misconduct that keeps happening and the lack of consequence. And it's going to keep happening, as we know in life, in anything, until there's a consequence. And so what I've seen in my practice of years for 30 years and the research shows that the system, what's happening are prosecutors, one of the things that happens when they commit misconduct is they hide evidence. And sometimes they bring in false testimony into a case that they know is intentionally, they know that they do this, or they don't disclose that they've given benefits to witnesses that are key witnesses in cases like paying their rent. And so this types of misconduct, while it might be regrettable by somebody that might uncover it, it's consequence free. And prosecutors have little incentive to change this. So PEP started this initiative not as an anti-prosecutor organization. It's pro-ethical prosecution. That's the way that we like to frame it and the way that we like to talk about it, because as you kind of said, prosecutors have an essential role in the criminal court system and public safety. And that role only really works if they do what they're telling us to do, which is follow the Constitution. Don't break the rules. But when they hide evidence and they fail to correct false testimony that they know is false, they conceal benefits, they harm the accused, they harm victims, witnesses, families, and legitimacy, like the public trust of the system. So our initiative is grounded in welcoming and supporting good prosecutors, because I think it will protect the credibility of the system that we have.
I think you named your organization well because it puts a positive. I don't want to use the word spin, but you know what I mean. It's a more positive kind of framing of what you're trying to accomplish. That by holding prosecutors perhaps who lack integrity, holding them accountable, you're actually protecting the ones that do have integrity and are honorable. So what was it that really inspired you to get this initiative off the ground? I'm assuming the Barry, am I pronouncing right? Barry Morphew?
Yes, you
So I'm
are.
assuming that was a big part of this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but could you also tell us a little bit about the Morphew case and what you experienced?
Sure. So let me give you kind of, I don't want to fold it all into the Barry Morphew experience, because I think people wrongly assume that,
Okay.
and that I have some vengeance, which I don't. So I came to this after nearly, as you said, 30 years in and around the criminal court system. So I've committed my life to helping people in civil rights work and policy reform as a public defender, as a private lawyer, as a partner in a law firm. And then I created my own law firm. I've been on boards and was the president of the Colorado lawyers committee, which commits lawyers to do systemic litigation for free pro bono. And I've worked on major systems change litigation in Colorado, challenging the unconstitutional treatment of people with mental illness that are in jails, right? So I come from a long and diverse background in kind of looking at systems and how they get broken. And so I've seen these issues from a lot of angles, right? Systems that fail. And what inspired me in PEP was seeing the same pattern repeat itself. In my own cases, I was often catching egregious misconduct by prosecutors before conviction. And kind of like the case you described that you participated in. And when the system should have been able to correct its own course, it laid on me, one lawyer, to be able to uncover it and change the course of that person's life. And too often what I saw before I represented Barry Morphew, but that was the ultimate, right? Is that it wasn't just these low-level prosecutors that were committing the misconduct. In fact, it was more likely the elected prosecutors, the chiefs of the offices, and leadership that defended the misconduct instead of fixing it. And so, Barry Morphew, I started representing in 2021. And this was after a record number of cases where I represented innocent people who were wrongly and falsely charged, and prosecutors were hiding evidence in their cases that I uncovered. And he was the last straw. Barry Morphew's case was the last straw. That case showed me how powerful prosecutors are and how their conduct and discovery failures, they have to hand over, they're mandated to hand over discovery in cases. And what it showed me was when they don't do that, how serious that derailment of the criminal system and prosecution can harm everybody involved. Everybody, from just the person who, could be a possible juror in the case, to the judge, to the court clerks, to the judges. And what I found was that it's not just about one prosecutor, one office, one state. That case tipped me off to the national exoneration data and the national statistics that show this is a nationwide problem. And I mean, I can talk to you more specifically about what I uncovered in the Barry Morphew case if you want to hear about that too.
I'd love to hear it. Yeah, if you could touch on that.
Okay. So when I started representing Barry Morphew in 2021, all I had was a 124-page affidavit. And it was written like a National Enquirer magazine. It had footnotes of thoughts of, the investigator that wrote the affidavit. Like, what if this happened? Well, but what if when he said this is what he meant? It was full of hunches and beliefs, and it left out the actual science that was used in order to bring them to the belief that there was probable cause to charge Barry Morphew. And the reason why it left out the science is because the scientists that made opinions that the prosecutors had were not in favor of Barry Morphew committing the murder. And so when you read this tabloid, when I read this tabloid in 2021, I was scratching my head. Yes, I could see some, oh yeah, that seems suspicious. Oh yeah, that seems to cause concern. But there wasn't anything beyond a hunch or a hypothesis that seemed to be tested with any kind of science or true corroboration through witnesses that would lead any kind of rational person to see that there was probable cause to charge him with murder. And so started, after all my experience in criminal law, realized that maybe with the prosecutor, what's not inside that 124-page affidavit was more important than what was actually in it. And so, really made a case for the judge to force the prosecutors to provide me every single piece of evidence that they possibly had that wasn't contained in this affidavit. And over a period of months, probably I'd say 9 months, I think I obtained maybe 50% of what the prosecutors had. And what was included there was evidence that, one, the DNA that was on critical pieces of evidence that they believed was critical pieces of evidence did not match Barry, wasn't Barry's, was an unknown male's that they sent out through what we all know, is CODIS, which is the, offender index, the National Offender Index that has DNA of prior sex offenders and felony offenders. And it matched multiple unknown individuals, males that were in that system. They didn't notify or tell the judge that when they arrested Barry. That wasn't in the affidavit. They didn't notify the judge or me when they arrested Barry in the affidavit that they had multiple canines that were trained in identifying contaminated and or decomposition and or blood and or the scent of a human being that they had sent out at the scene where they believed that she went missing or was abducted, and in his house where they believed that Barry murdered her. They didn't include any of the information that the canines and their experts determined. There was no decomposition found in or around the house, in the cars, around the place where she went missing. And in fact, they did find her scent where her bike was found, where it's believed that she was abducted from, instead of where Barry staged an actual abduction. So they didn't include the science that involved the GPS data. So what they instead included was a map at the end of the affidavit. And it showed, and John, you've probably seen this, but it showed pinpoints about where Barry's phone was at certain moments before, when they believed that his wife went missing. All right. And they contributed that to the belief that Barry was chasing her around the house in moments before he killed her, with an unknown. They didn't have a theory, by the way, on how he killed her, just that he killed her. And so they produced this very compelling looking map to the judge, saying, look, his phone's moving all the way around. It's probably because he's chasing her, because he probably gave her tranquilizer that probably made her spasm. That because even though we've never tested tranquilizer on a human, we don't know that he had any tranquilizer, but we want to believe that he probably had some, and that he probably gave it to her in some way through a dart gun that he had, even though that dart gun was broken, and that he somehow must have delivered it to her in some other way. And so this map is evidence of that. And it just was kind of landed at the back of the affidavit, and it was very compelling. But when we got all of the discovery, what it proved was that the FBI expert in phone GPS data examination said, don't trust the data that you sent me about the GPS, because there's something called static drift. There's no cell towers in that area at all. Like, no one has cell service in this area. It's like kind of a vacation, beautiful area in Southwest Colorado. No one has cell service there. It's nearly impossible. We all know of those areas, around the country where that's inaccessible. So you can't trust these pinpoints that a GPS, that a cell tower is telling you. In fact, when it was really mathematically uncovered and revealed, like we did kind of an autopsy of the data of this pinpoint map, what it actually showed was that Barry Morphew would have had to been running about 100 miles or faster through walls over a period of 2 minutes in order to achieve this very pinpoint list. And they were warned by experts, don't trust this data. It's not believable. Yet they didn't include that in the information to the judge. Instead, they fabricated a map. So that's kind of how the case started breaking down. And the more that I information that the judge forced them to provide me, the more it uncovered how much misconduct was happening. And the judge couldn't take it anymore and finally said, you know what? You're breaking the rules. You're not providing us the documents. And you have to instead do better. Gave them another chance to do better. Gave them another chance to do better. And they couldn't do better. And so the judge said, that's it. I am now going to sanction you because I don't know what else to do. And I'm going to have to not allow you to call 11 of 16 of these experts to the trial, because you're not. This is not a game. You can't force the prosecutors to challenge your experts when you haven't given them the information and what their opinions are. They should have a right to test these experts, and you're not giving them this information, along with this information that you didn't provide me in the beginning. And the judge said something like, and how, by the way, had I known about this DNA issue, I probably would not have arrested him. I probably would not have signed that arrest warrant,
This is
right?
the judge that said this?
The judge wrote this in a 28-page opinion that was the most thorough and really detailed opinion I'd ever seen by a judge on discovery issues. But that's because this case was so high profile and it was being followed by every true crime podcaster known to man, including the prosecutor herself getting on these podcasts, which is unethical, talking about the case and about Barry's guilt, inferring that Barry was guilty just by the name of the podcast that she was on, called Profiling Evil. And so the judge called this a day and said, this is not going to happen in my courtroom, and issued that sanction. And instead of the prosecutors saying, okay, we did something wrong, we didn't provide the evidence, we own our mistake, we're going to find a better way to do this, maybe dismiss the case, and refile it when they got the evidence or when they can get their case together, right? Instead, what they did is they investigated the judge secretly by yes, and this all is factual. This is all the reason why the DA ended up being disbarred. But instead, they text messaged each other. These are three very high-level prosecutors, two chiefs who've been around in Colorado prosecuting all over the state, including Kobe Bryant. Okay, so these aren't just baby prosecutors. And they texted each other saying things like, let's get him. Oh, he must have a bias against us. He must love domestic violence offenders for him to want to sanction us and tank our case. Forget about the fact, right, that they tanked their own case by their own misconduct. So they investigated the judge. They went to go talk to his ex-wife to find out if he was actually a wife beater. And then, of course, their thought was they could recuse this judge because, he would be a known wife beater and likes, and that's the real reason behind him sanctioning them. Well, the ex-wife revealed, no, he's never talked about the Morphew case to me, and he's never beaten me, and he's a really good guy. And the prosecutors were left with this case that was not going to succeed in trial, and so they were forced to dismiss the case. They dismissed it suddenly and without really notifying, not, I say that no, they didn't notify anybody. They didn't notify the judge. They just arrived in court with all their media friends that they notified other than me and my client and the judge. And they stacked the room with all their investigators, the FBI agents, CBI agents, their entire team that went after Barry Morphew, and the media and all the true crime podcasters that were in the courtroom. And we were wondering why all these people are in this courtroom for this perfunctory appearance. And they said, we're dismissing it because we found her body. And we don't think it's right, Judge, for us to continue with this prosecution because we found her body, but it's buried under a bunch of snow and we can't get to it fast enough. And it would be so unfair to Barry Morphew. So, we don't want that to happen. So they dismissed the case. And so, of course, it was ingenuous. It was unethical what had happened. And of course, they didn't find the body buried in a bunch of snow. And that's completely false. And they did that in order to get out of the case with what's called without prejudice, dismissing a case without prejudice, right? Because if you don't dismiss a case, if you dismiss it in good faith, then you can try the person again. And so that was their way to convince the judge. And at that moment, I quit practicing criminal law because I couldn't fathom working in another case like this for somebody in a system where it would take this much in order to uncover the unethical nature of some prosecutors and having to do it case by case. Instead, I realized that the system needs to change and there needs to be major reform.
I mean, it's such, I can't even imagine what it was like for you to not only experience this, right, but to actually observe it happening. Like you must have thought, like, what kind of crazy land did I land in here? Prosecute. it's funny. I have to kind of disclose. I'm a professional coach. I work with a lot of leaders and so forth. And when I hear your story, I can't. There's a part of my brain that I can't turn off, which is my appreciation for culture and how culture drives decision making and drives behavior.
Right.
And I think in this kind of a situation, and I'd love for you to comment on this, is that bad systems will produce bad people or bad behavior. And so you've got cultural issues potentially within the office of the elected prosecutor, but you can also have cultural issues across the profession, the National District Attorneys Association, and the the extent to that they impact the culture. And I've done some work with NDAA over the years, and I've always had a good experience. So I have nothing bad to say about that organization, but like where, and I know this is a big question that I'm asking you because we could talk for 8 hours about this,
Yeah.
is is it a cultural problem, and how is this cultural toxicity being fueled or produced?
So it is a cultural problem. It's a systemic problem. And it's kind of, it started, I'll start with this. I used to hear, okay, there's just some bad apples. That used to be the tone of when you would talk to prosecutors about when I would uncover misconduct. And I would talk to them about some of the experiences that I had. I'd say, well, let's talk about this case or that case. Say, that's just one bad apple, Iris. That's just one bad apple. And as we know, one bad apple can spoil the bunch, right? You go to the farmer's market, you get a basket of strawberries, one strawberry rots. What happens to the rest of them? They all get moldy, right? So
Mhm.
and that's exactly what happens. So when people from the top down, their incentive is to win, right? And you have prosecutors who get on LinkedIn or they get on some other platform and they're running for office, for example, and they say, I want to say how many convictions I have gotten. And or they say, I want to highlight Prosecutor Joe's many convictions that he's gotten. I'm so proud of him for convicting so and so for murder. So when they highlight the winning above ethics, the winning above standards, that's when the culture is driven to that incentive. The incentive is to win at all costs. It's not to follow the ethics. And so we don't normally hear of prosecutors who are doing the good things, who are saying, I am handing over the whole file, even though things in there weaken my case. I'm so proud of this prosecutor for doing the right thing. We're not hearing that coming from the top down anymore. And so you can illuminate that structural problem to the national epidemic, which is this, right? And John, I know you know this, but it's not for reasons of forensic science, by the way, that exonerations are at an all-time high. It actually is. It's not. That's the lowest percentage. The highest percentage is official misconduct. I mean, nearly 75% of exonerations in 2025 were a result of official misconduct. And a high number of those because prosecutors are committing misconduct. And of those prosecutors, less than 2% suffer any type of discipline. That's the accountability gap, right? So when you have the structure, this system that says we want to win at all costs, we're going to give you in exchange for all these convictions, we're going to elect you to be the next United States senator, right? We're gonna elect you to be the next DA in one of our judicial districts. How about this? We're gonna elevate you to be a judge. And let me tell you something, John. In my own cases, not just other cases around the country, but in my own cases, including Barry Morphew. Let's just use Barry Morphew prosecutors. There was one that was disbarred. There was one who was involved in the pre-investigation of this case and reviewed the affidavit, and I'm hoping presumed to know the evidence, was involved in the emails that I mentioned to you before from the experts, knew better, right? That prosecutor also went through the Attorney Regulation Council because I filed a complaint against him,
Sure.
right? And Attorney Regulation decided in his circumstance that he left on the DA's office before things got really bad. All right. So he quit. So he promised Attorney Regulation, I understand my obligations. I promise you I do. And they said, you promise? Yeah, you promise. Okay. So we got a hand slap. That prosecutor continued on to replace the disbarred prosecutor. Okay. And now he is the elected DA in that judicial district. He has suffered more than 12 sanctions by judges who have said that he has knowingly violated the ethics and the rules of the court in turning over evidence. And in fact, was sanctioned so harshly in a triple murder that was the worst case in that county that's ever been seen in the history of Colorado, that he nearly could have lost the case and the victim's rights because he lied when he got on the stand and claimed he never knew about an email that a sheriff was sending out false information about one of the witnesses, that he claimed he didn't know anything about it. And so the judge said, you keep doing this. This is egregious. What is going to cause you to stop committing misconduct? His laundry list is so long and nothing has ever happened to him and he's still elected. And this gets back to this, which is not just the system. So he doesn't have a boss, John. Prosecutors don't have bosses, right? So they have so much power. They get to decide who's going to be charged, when they're going to be charged, what evidence they're going to hand over, and why they're charging the person. They make all these decisions. But not only do they not have bosses and they get to make all these decisions, but they also are very powerful. You know this. They're powerful in state houses, right?
Yes.
So, right? So their voice, their lobbyist is loud when they're talking about what laws to pass, how serious sanctions should be to the accused, to defendants. Let's increase the sentences. Let's make prison sentences longer. So they're in there actually making law, and they're telling. Don't be mistaken. They're telling legislators things like, "Hey, you know, if you don't agree with me on this, it might be really hard for you to win your next election because you're going to look like you're soft on crime."
Right.
So they are in not just their own sphere of power, but they're also in the sphere of making the laws.
Yeah.
So you know, it is a serious problem that we have these prosecutors who have so much power that don't have any accountability. Like any other profession, you as a scientist, you as a teacher,
Yeah.
you can be sued. You have accountability. I can be as a criminal defense lawyer, as a business owner, I can be. They have absolutely no accountability. They cannot be sued. They are 100% immune for what happens inside of a case. They cannot be sued.
You know, I really would like to have you back on at some point in the future. But one of the things that I want to just share with you real quick, and I'd love to get your comment on this, is I have explored. There was a famous, interestingly conservative commentator a number of years ago that wrote an article, and he was expressing his. He believed that prosecutors should not that should not be an elective office. And it was very, very compelling. And I agree with it. And I think that you could also, boy, I'm gonna anger some people when I say this, but tough. I think you could make the same case for sheriffs for similar reasons. But that being said, if you would allow me to, could I play devil's advocate for just a second?
Yes, I love it. I love it.
I'd like to hear what you have to say about this. Is that sometimes, or maybe even oftentimes, misconduct is in the eye of the beholder. It's an interpretation. It's an opinion. It's somebody's an opinion that a prosecutor, and again, this is in an adversarial system where people are butting heads every day. How what would you say to a prosecutor out there, because we have prosecutors that listen to this show, that would say, look, you know, you're a defense attorney. Your job is to go after prosecutors. We don't expect there's ever going to be a day where you're going to agree with prosecutors. That how do you get around this problem that that misconduct in many ways is it's an interpretive assertion that is being made. It's not always obvious. How do you get around that?
So two things is that um, I think that prosecutors make, mistakes, right? I think that they miss things. I think that, as people call them, whoopsies, right?
Yeah, right.
And right, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like the whoopsie problem,
yeah.
right? It's a whole different thing when a prosecutor, a scientist, a doctor, a lawyer, architect, a builder hides and or intentionally or knowingly, commits misconduct, right? So I don't know. I don't see that as being a case of interpretation, right? I see a mistake, yes, being a case of interpretation. But let me give you an example. All right. So um um let's use Richard Glossip. Okay, this is a non-scientific. I'll give you a scientific and a non-scientific. Okay.
Okay.
So Richard Glossip, he was on death row for 30 years out of Oklahoma. In 2025, our United States Supreme Court, okay, vacated his death penalty conviction. The reason they vacated it was for one reason, because the prosecutor on the case knowingly put on a snitch witness, meaning a witness that they kind of encouraged and paid and gave benefit to,
Like a jailhouse informant type of a
a
thing. Yeah.
jailhouse informant. Yep, yep. To testify against Richard Glossip when they knew that this witness had significant mental health issues, and they didn't reveal those to the other side, right? That he was on medication, he wasn't on medication at the time, he had recently been in the mental health institution, that he was psychotic, and that he had memory issues. All of that not included in the delivery of the information when they provided it to the defense. The United States Supreme Court said that is unparalleled misconduct. You put a witness on a stand and you knew that he had credibility issues, and you didn't even give the defense a chance to just give them a chance to question this person. The jury still might find him guilty. Okay. The jury might still find Richard Glossip guilty, but you didn't even give a chance for them to uncover the key witness in the case, the snitch witness in the case, and all the fallibility, all the problems that came with his testimony, right? They let that happen. The Supreme Court said, "Nah, that's completely unconstitutional. You cannot put evidence on that is false, that is so detrimental to someone's life and their liberty, that would likely could have changed the outcome of his
Well,
conviction."
I mean,
Okay.
that's a Brady Giglio issue,
Okay,
right?
exactly. So that's not okay. So that's not an issue. They actually call that an Depew issue. It's similar. So
Okay.
it's similar. It's when a prosecutor puts on false evidence instead of
Oh,
hide.
instead of withholding.
Braiding is hiding evidence. So it's like
Gotcha.
omitting. Same idea. So and it's looked at post conviction, similar to the Brady evidence. Okay, so that's one example, like where it's not a case of interpretation. No one needed to go, huh? I don't know. The prosecutor, I don't know. I guess that was okay. No one, even the Supreme Court knew that wasn't okay. This guy nearly was executed 7 times. I think he had 4 final meals. This guy could have been dead, right? What's this prosecutor doing right now? Well, she is teaching other law students at Oklahoma University Law School how to prosecute people. That's what she's doing now.
Hmm.
And the Attorney General of Oklahoma, who assisted in overturning this conviction, okay, he was asked, "What are you going to do about this woman that did this? What are you going to do? Are you going to report her? Are you going to do something about this?" He said, "No, it's been too long. It's been too long. Okay, that was his reasoning. So how do we expect anybody to do anything different when nothing ever happens? These prosecutors. Okay, yeah, Richard Glossip. Now he's sitting back, looking at getting his case retried. Okay, but how has this helped the system after we found out that? Okay, so now let's look at a science case. Okay, 3 days ago, a woman by the name of Deb Nichols, a judge looked at her case after she's been sitting in prison for 17 years for arson and murdering her 3 children. 17 years. Her husband's also still in prison. Innocence lawyers, after she lost all of her appeals, were poking around the case and trying to understand kind of what more there was there to her conviction, because it seemed a little bit odd. And what they found was the prosecutor withheld the expert opinion of the state arson expert that agreed with the defense arson expert that this likely wasn't arson, that it was a contaminated sample and there was no accelerant. Okay. Not challenging the science of arson. Okay.
Right.
Just saying, okay, it had nothing to do with that. And so it took years to get that piece of evidence that the prosecutor hid out into the light and then out in front of a judge who now 9 months later, 3, 4 days ago, said, that's Brady, that's prejudicial. I'm going to vacate her conviction. Okay. These prosecutors that did that, one of them, by the way, is one of the ones that was on Morphew that I mentioned, that's now an elected DA.
Wow. Gee.
Okay.
That's a full circle statement.
Right. Okay.
Wow.
Okay. So when you say to me, and by the way, the prosecutors that were arguing whether or not that was Brady this last summer, I understand they have a job. I get it. They get a case in front of them, and their argument, does it have to be that they agree that it's not Brady? Do they have to fight that? That's a question. Do they have to fight? Well, they're looking at the file and prosecute their fellow colleagues who are still practicing law are the ones that are on the hook, right? So but they have a choice to be ethical and to look at that. And you know what they did, John? These prosecutors, the new ones, went and hired former prosecutors to give them a legal opinion on whether or not that was Brady, even though it's a no duh to everybody, I think, in the world. Okay.
Yeah.
And these former prosecutors wrote a 8-page single-spaced opinion that said 100% it's Brady and should have been turned over. What did the new prosecutors do with that opinion? They didn't turn it over.
Gosh.
Okay. So it suddenly came to light a couple months ago. And what happened to that prosecutor that hid that opinion? And by the way, the opinion was written to her. Dear Jennifer Veman, what happened? Oh, she's now a judge, John. Okay. So this is when you say, I hear you when you say who's to judge. You know what I say? I say, let the judges judge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I tell you, I'm out of time. I really want to have you back because I have so many questions, and I'd like to stay in touch with you. I really,
Good.
I really like the angle that you're taking to solve this problem. It's really unique and it's positive. But can you tell our listeners a little bit about how they can learn more about you and your organization, how they can find you?
Yes. Look, I'm really excited about Protect Ethical Prosecutors. I'm happy to talk to you more. We're really working hard on public education, on helping people understand the power of prosecutors, and when they do the right thing, that they should be celebrated. But their title, doesn't make somebody immune, and for misconduct. And we want to eliminate immunity. And so I'd love for your followers to follow us and support us, because the more that we can get the word out and educate people, I think we're going to have a better shot at eliminating this in state houses and writing this in that prosecutors shouldn't be special. when they commit intentional knowing misconduct. They shouldn't be more special than the rest of us and or passing ballot measures where I think people really believe and support this message. But we need to get it out.
Yeah. Is there a website that people can
Yes.
go to, or can they follow you on social media?
Yes, thank you. So they can go to, it's a very long name, but they can go to www.protectethicalprosecutors.org.
Okay.
Our Instagram is at end prosecutor misconduct. And we're also on LinkedIn. And
Great.
we're on YouTube and TikTok and all the rest, but you'll find us by going to our website.
Great. And one of the things that I'd really like to talk with you more about is it appropriate for prosecutors in the modern era to be elected? Is there, in other words, are there better systemic or structural solutions that could be implemented that we could actually start talking about? Because it is a people I don't think realize the criminal justice system is very anger based, right? It's like we have to be angry at this defendant, and I get that, especially if you're a survivor or a victim, surviving family member of a victim. But it doesn't justify. It can never justify misconduct. And also, what's the prosecutor community doing about this? Because they're the ones that should be screaming "Holy hell!" Like we cannot have our colleagues behaving this way, right? I mean,
You you
it's
you 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 want to believe, but it's so hard for them to get rid of their power. And lifting this veil shield that they've had for 50 years, the United States Supreme Court gave them this immunity. It's not law.
yeah.
They really have enjoyed the privilege of being protected. And so it's hard for prosecutors, even though I think that good prosecutors don't fear accountability and they should welcome it.